Hello friends, this is Chris Beckman. I'm the corporate chaplain for Ebenezer, and I hope you've been enjoying this series of reflections and meditations that we've been doing. We've been having some fun creating them. I hope you have found it insightful and lighthearted and maybe a way to help pass the time during this time of COVID-19. We also have created a series of worship services that are coming out every Sunday. And if you're wondering how to see those, reach out to your activity director or the ED, the executive director in your building. Today's reflection is number 8 in our series, and I've called it a phrase that so many of us are familiar now or have gotten familiar with, and it's called sheltering in place. How many of us that is this new terminology, sheltering in place? It sounds so wonderful. And yet for a lot of us, I think that very terminology and the concept and the difficulties are so apparent as well. Sheltering in place. You may not have known, but that we had to close the corporate office in Minneapolis out of concern for COVID-19 and for the safety of our staff, and to respect the decisions of the governor to try to keep us all well and safe. So the last day that I went to the corporate office last week, I got there late morning, and as I got out of my vehicle, something caught my eye, and I looked down, and there was a rabbit. And the rabbit had this mottled, brownish, grayish, blackish coat, and I barely noticed the rabbit, because the rabbit seemed to blend in with the environment. It was camouflaged. And what I found really amazing and came to mind was the rabbit was tucked in against this wall of bushes. And I just watched for like 2 minutes because all you could see was the rabbit's heart beating a little bit and a little bit of breathing. And the rabbit was tucked in and seemed so at peace and in place. And the phrase sheltering in place came to me. I wonder how many of you are struggling with this time of sheltering in place. In fact, for a lot of us who are introverts, this is actually a marvelous time because a lot of us find healing and wellness and beauty in being alone and having time to ourselves and time to recharge and to re-energize. But even for a lot of us introverts, we're getting a lot of time, perhaps too much time. And those of you who are more extroverted on the personality scale, you probably are going crazy, trying to figure out where am I going to get my energy, and who am I going to connect to, and whom am I going to communicate with. Well, dear friends, this might be a time for you to try out something different. For those of us who are introverts, this might come easier, and we may get to try things that we've wanted to do and finally have the time to do. For those of us who are extroverts, this might be a real interesting challenge and perhaps offer some beauty as you try to figure out ways to deal with all of this time. This might be a time for us to practice meditation. That's sitting quietly and alone. In the Christian church, a lot of us call this centering prayer. It's as simple as sitting with a word or with a phrase or with a certain biblical passage or sitting in silence, waiting for God's word to speak to us. Did you know that the first act of prayer is not us talking, but is actually listening? How do we find enough quiet in our hearts and in our lives so that God can speak to us in the silence, in our centering prayer, in our time of sitting quietly? Another way that a lot of us are using this time is to focus on mindfulness. There's this beauty and wisdom that suggests that every moment of our lives is this opportunity to connect with God and to connect with each other, and to connect with the world. How many of us are aware of that mindfulness when we wash dishes, or when we even communicate with each other, or when we do the simplest, most basic things? The belief among mindfulness folks is that every moment of every life has the opportunity for us to be aware of God's presence and for our place in the world and our connection and community with one another. Of course, then when we become mindful, there's also the opportunity to have gratitude for the blessings that come to us. How many of us, when the water comes tumbling out of our tap, give thanks that we didn't have to go out to the well and pull it up, that we didn't even have to dig the well? Sometimes I complain when I have to wash clothes, and I'm like, you didn't haul the water, you didn't have to heat it up, you didn't even have to make the soap. All you had to do was put it in and hit the button. How to be mindful of that and to have gratitude for those beautiful things that are in and about. It's a wonderful opportunity for all of us who are introverts to explore the beauty and the power that comes from being alone, of being centered, of being with God. And for those of us who are more extroverted on the scale, this might be a little more of a challenging time. But it might also be a time when you get to do something that you've always wanted to try, to meditate, or to pray, or to read scripture slowly and purposefully, or even to become aware when you wash your clothes, the gifts that come to us of having water and soap and electricity, the beauty of God's presence all around us in our world. You see, part of this sheltering in place is the invitation to stand still a bit and to be present. You know, when I came out of the corporate office on that day last week when we closed the office, when I got back into my vehicle and looked over, the rabbit was still there. The rabbit was still in the same place, tucked against the wall, breathing slowly. I could see the breath and the heartbeat. And while I don't know that I could have sat in one place for 6 or 8 hours, as the rabbit did, maybe I can sit for 10 minutes. Or each day during COVID-19, say I start with 2 minutes, and every day I add another minute to my prayer time, or my reading time, or my reflecting time, or my meditation time. Good luck to you with that. And may God's blessings come to you anew each and every day, and especially during this difficult time of COVID-19. Blessings on the journey. Thanks for listening.